I was an exorcist in training. I wish I would never seen the Vatican's basement. Previously, I screamed uncomfortably in the ancient stool, its uneven padding forcing me to sit at a slant. In retrospect, I'm sure Cardinal Roblet chose it on purpose. He wanted to see me as uncomfortable as possible. All part of the test. Of course, I was nervous already. As intended, the grand chapel's ceiling, soaring above us, made me feel small. 66 feet above us, God reached out to Adam, granting him life. The metaphor was obvious. I was Adam, waiting for my prize. But what was the Cardinal about to give me? The old man fixed me in his gaze. "What do you want to know about hell?" he asked after a few moments. I thought back to my training. Hell is the absence of God, I answered carefully. He smirked. Good, cautious answer. We like caution here, sometimes. Other times we prefer zones. He started laughing, as if he had just made some kind of outrageous joke. The Cardinal had grown up on the streets of Montevideo in Uruguay. He had a reputation for crude jokes. Some people called him direct. Others called him an asshole. I suppose he was both. "Let me rephrase," he said. "Suppose I were to ask you the geography of hell. Could you draw me a map? Could you describe its mountains, its storms?" I shook my head. "I have never thought of it as a physical place," I answered, still careful. "Of course not," he said. "But you are not so stupid as to deny the connection between the physical and spiritual, correct? Take your little altercation in Los Angeles. You sewed the girl's lips shut, correct? But if that's all you did, there would have been no effect. You were able to quell the demon's hunger because the swinging of the mouth had a metaphorical, spiritual equivalent. Some with the demon's eyes on the plain. Think of Matthew 18:9. And if thine eyes cause thee to stumble, pluck it out and cast it from thee. It's good for them to enter into life with one eye, rather than having two eyes, to be cast into the hell of fire. Now I'm a bit lost, and I confessed. The Cardinal rubbed at his temples, clearly disappointed. "Let's try this one more time. Stop being so goddamned careful, or I'm sending you back to the State to study under Father David." I shuddered at the thought. Father David was a notorious coward, a priest only fit to deal with minor exorcism. He had called the Vatican for assistance so many times on major ones that he would earn the name Father Backup amongst his peers. Those things you sealed, where do you think they live? Things back to Maya Knowles' house. I closed my eyes and thought back to the house where out shone Maya Knowles' lips shut. I had spent every hour since then trying to block out the smell of blood and colon, the thickness of the air. Suddenly I found I was speaking, almost without trying. "A swamp," I said, "thick mud, shit raining from the sky." The Cardinal's eyes lit up. "Yes, yes, more. Someone's always screaming. Animal sounds. The air is freezing. There is a constant hail pelting the burning mud." "Yes," he shouted, and then he began to recite. "In the third circle I arrive, off shores, ceaseless, accursed, heavy, and cold unchanged, forever both in kind and in degree. Large hail discolored water, sleety flow. Through the dun midnight air streamed down amain. Snack all the land wherein the tempest fell." I struggled to remember where he was quoting from. Certainly not the Bible this time. "Inferno," he said after a moment, looking disappointed. "You are not a literary man. I studied engineering in college. I said more of a math brain. I do remember something about Dante being non-canonical." He rubbed his temples again. "There was something exaggerated about his movements, like Donald Duck losing his cool in an old cartoon. There are truths in this world that are better kept secret," he said. "The church must act as a shield sometimes, you know." guarding the flock from the fiery darts of the wicked, and so it is with us exorcists. I looked up at him and slightly confused. I wasn't aware that you were. Are you an exorcist yourself? I mean, you were a cardinal. He started laughing. There's a lot you don't know. He stood, stretching slightly. Then he began to lift the hem of his robe. I looked down to see a deep scare running from his ankle to his knee. Got that one from a demon of violence named Toru. Everyone was sure I would lose the leg before the knee. Doctors are idiots, of course. He raised the rope farther and turned from me, exposing four parallel scars across his back. Those are from Mammon himself. Those are from Mammon himself, demon of greed. He got away from me, but not before he left me this little souvenir. He paused, looking up at the ceiling, up at God. They are demons, you understand. They are different than the minor entities responsible for most possessions. Even what the church calls a major exorcism is really just the minor leagues compared to what we handle. These demons I'm talking about, they are the lords and lieutenants of hell, professional soldiers for the other side. More exorcists will never encounter one over the course of a whole career. The things that was inside my annals, I started to say, was Lady of Hell, a demon of gluttony, quite powerful. Really, you shouldn't be here today. If things had gone according to the demon's plan, she would have eaten you too, and they consumed her own host body like an Ouroboros, breaking her own arms and legs and swallowing them whole. I was beginning to feel sick, and if I'm going to be honest, I was afraid. Everything I had known about demons up to that point was suddenly invalid. I thought I would be a soldier for the church, but now I realized I was playing parlor games with Hal's second stringers, where the things that had taken Maya and Anselmo, the worst things out there, where there are even old horrors to be discovered. Why are you telling me all this? He smacked his head and muttered, Dios mio. Then he looked up at me. Isn't it obvious? He finally asked. I want to know if you want in. If you want to play in the major leagues, Mizo. Do you want to fight some real demons with us? Or do you want to go back to sprinkling holy water on little shits pretending to be possessed so that they can get more attention from Mama? I thought of the demon slurping Father Anthony's guys through the tiny hole at the side of its mouth. I thought of the baby head spurting from Father Anselmo's neck, its deep, guttural laugh. I thought of the foul air, smell of shit. Cardinal Robles held up a hand. Don't answer yet, he said. It's enough to know you were considering it. Before you answer, you need to see the reality of what we're up against. He swept his arm out with a flourish and said, Follow me. Do you believe in God? Any kind of God? I looked up at Sophia. It was a bold question for a second date, but she was asking it anyway. Even before I would asked her out, I would known Sophia was religious. Not that she was a fanatic or anything, but she went to church most Sundays, which was unusual in our social group. I shrugged, hoping we could deal with the question quickly and move on to another topic. I think at some point I decided it was one of those big questions that you could never answer, so I stopped asking. I try to spend my time on problems that have solutions. She silently ate a few forkfuls of her salad. I'm assuming you do, I said, trying to break the awkward silence. Believe what I mean? Well, I don't believe in God, she said after a bit. Believe implies there would be a possibility of doubt. I know there is a God because I know there are demons. I have seen them at work. I topped off my wine and took a drink. This was getting interesting. What do you mean, seen them? It's going to sound crazy, so I will understand if you get up from the table after a bit and walk out on me. I won't be offended at all. We can still be friends after. I met her eyes. They were deadly serious. I'm not gonna do that, I said. You can't tell me. Now it was her turn to take a long drink. When I was younger, fourth grade, I was possessed for a few months, she said. I almost spit out my wine. I know how it sounds, she continued. I used to be embarrassed to tell people, but it's a part of who I am. There was a demon living inside me. It pushed me to a dark little bubble that I didn't know existed. It was terrifying, watching her through a black haze, saying the most vile things to my parents and my sister. I'd always been a good kid. At least that's what I thought. But I must have let her in somehow. She was crying now. For a second I wondered if I was on a date with an insane person. But when I looked at her, she didn't seem even the least bit crazy. I reached out and took her hand. "I'm so sorry," I said. "It's okay," she said. "The church, they sent people. Exorcist. It turned out to be something minor," they said. "It didn't feel minor to me, but their prayers made it go away." "I'm sorry," I said again. What else could I say? "Don't be afraid," she said. "It was a gift." After that, I didn't have to believe anymore. I knew there was something out there, a bad thing and a good thing. I have gotten to carry that with me every day of my life. I followed Cardinal Robles through a series of rooms and doors, each less grand than the last. Gone were the frescoes and magnificent tapestries. Instead, we webbed through corridors of simple brick. I realized that the architecture too was growing simpler, older. The brickwork was uneven, caked with centuries of grime. The air began to grow cold. Without realizing it, I recognized that we'd been walking slowly downward. There were no windows here or even electric light, just large candles inset into the walls. Of course, everyone knows about the grandeur of the current apostolic palace. But like many things in life, truths lurk beneath the surface that most people never realize. Some of these bricks you are seeing now go all the way back to the 4th century. This was all part of the old St. Peter's Basilica. Constantine in the first. He was a convert like you know. The path we followed was winding and haphazard. The path we followed was winding and haphazard. Without the cardinal there, I wondered if I would be able to retrace my steps and escape. Yes, escape. That word started to echo in my mind. I realized I didn't like it here. I hated it. Wanted to get out at any cost. Back to the light. The morals, God and Adam. And then something shifted in me. Somewhere not too far away, I felt her presence. It was unmistakably Sophia, as if she would just walk behind me in the hall. I turned. Sure, I had seen her, but she was gone. It was enough to make me keep walking forward. Finally, we came to a door. "Beyond this door is no return," said the cardinal after a few moments. "Even if you choose not to join us, you will have seen things beyond your imagining, beyond the worst descriptions of Dante or even Revelation." For a moment, I only stared at the door handle. It looked ornate and ancient, filthy from the grip of 1,000 hands of 1,000 priests. Beyond it, I heard something that sounded like the clanking of metal on metal. "Go ahead," said the cardinal, "and open it." I took a step back in revulsion, but when I looked again, I saw now a handle, but a woman's hand, soft and welcoming. I knew who it belonged to. Saw the familiar wedding band on the ring finger. I knew, somehow, that if I went forward, I was moving closer to her. I walked forward and opened the door. We entered a room built of ancient stones. It was perhaps as large as a high school gymnasium, but perfectly round, with many doors extending in all directions. To one side sat a man in priest's robes and thick leather apron. Nearby, a cauldron of molten silver sat over a roaring fire. As I watched, the priest said a blessings over the silver, then poured it into a large cross-shaped mold. Soon he was pounding on the surface. Beside me, in neat stakes, lay perhaps 100 such crosses, all neatly staked. "Why so many?" I asked the cardinal, who only smirked. You will soon see." He gestured to the blacksmith, who set aside his hammer for a moment. "Where are the new prisoners? Or just the girl, actually?" asked the cardinal, and the man gestured silently to one of the doors, adorned with gold inlay and flanked by small silver gargoyles. The man resumed his work as we walked to the door and opened it. On the other side I found out what the crosses were for. In the center of a small, dimly lighted room lay a cage. More of a box, really, a 6-foot cube. The whole thing had been built of silver cross, all elaborately connected to form inescapable grid. Inside lay Maya Knowles. Her eyes were no longer closed, but the stitching still ran across her lips. Both of her wrists were mantled in bracers connected on opposite sides of the cage by silver chains. I gave the cardinal a curious look. "This is like no exorcism I have ever seen," I said. He shook his head. "You misunderstand, Father," he said. "It's no longer an exorcism, Maya, and whoever has infested her will be here as our permanent guests, unable to cause further mischief in the world." I felt something twist in my stomach. "You have to let her go," I said quietly. "I can't get the thing out of here." "Together, maybe together we." The cardinal shook his head. "You could kill her," he said. "Release her that way, but there is no saving Maya Knowles' mortal life, which is why she'll be our guest here for as long as she lives, for as long as the demon is trapped within Maya's mortal coil. It will be unable to hurt another soul." "You can't," I said. "Maya, she's still in there. She's an innocent." "Were she truly innocent, the demon would have never infested her," said the cardinal. "Please understand. I know this is a lot to swallow. This is why you work in the basement, out of the light. What you do here takes moral courage. The same bravery that Abraham possessed when he stood over Esau, dagger in hand. Thanks to Maya's sacrifice, dozens of others, possibly hundreds, will be spread a similar fate. She's a true cage, the box of silver crosses that just keeps her in place." As he spoke, Maya looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "It's her," I said. "Right now it's her, not the demon. It led her to the surface. She's experiencing all of this." "Of course," said the cardinal. "The demon loves to hide inside. It loves to let her suffer." "Maya can't eat like that," I said. "Can't drink. She won't live long." The cardinal shook his head. You still don't understand the powers we are facing with demons of this strength. These lieutenants of hell, the possessed body is essentially immortal. It has no need of sustenance. Maya will still be here long after you and I are both dust." I wanted to fall to my knees and vomit. The cardinal was staring at me hard, trying to read my reaction. "Do you need a drink?" he asked. "Water or wine?" I found I could barely speak. He shook his head, looking disappointed. "Do what you must," he whispered. "I never claimed it was easy to be a soldier on the front lines." I ignored him and took a step forward, Maya. Then suddenly something compelled me to run to her. I felt around the cage of silver crosses, searching for a hand that would open or a weak spot on in the soldering. "Stay away," shouted Cardinal Robles. He was keeping his distance from both of us. "You still don't know what you're dealing with, and those restraints aren't built to be permanent." Before he would even finish his sentence, I heard a horrible cracking sound, and I looked over to see Maya wrenching her arm against one of the bracers. The arm had clearly broken, and now blood was gushing freely from the places where her bone had pierced her flesh. Quickly, she pulled the broken limb from the brace and swung her limp forearm in my direction, sparing me with blood. The blood splattered across my face, running down my lips and into my mouth, and I was struck by the sensation that I would ingested poison. "Drink up, priest," the thing inside her shouted before breaking into peals of laughter. I looked around the room looking for some kind of weapon. I was filled suddenly with a bloodlust like I would never known. I stepped back, shouted Cardinal Robles again. This time he grabbed my collar and pulled hard. He was far stronger than he looked, and I found myself clattering against the ground. He rubbed at the bridge of his nose, and frustrated. The demon was laughing now at me, and I realized it. "This is your new soldier, Robles?" he asked. "He'll be dead before the week is out." As she spoke, blood continued to pour from her open wound. Seeing my eyes fixed on it, she tried to swing it at me again, but this time I was too far away for the blood to hit me. My stomach turned. If I'm going to be honest, I almost pissed myself. In that moment I realized I couldn't be in the room another second. My instincts took over. I had to leave. The demon cackled as the fear took over, and I ran. "Go, if you like," called Cardinal Robles. "But you can't run from the devil." I was more terrified than I would ever been in my life. If I'm being honest, not just of the things in Maya, but of the cardinals outside the cage, of the whole new reality I would have stumbled into. I ran back to the room with dozens of doors to find the blacksmith back at his work, smoothing out another silver cross. I tried to remember which door I would come from in the first place, but they all looked basically the same. I walked the circle, fruitlessly searching for some identifying mark, but came up empty. Finally, I just opened one. On the other side was a dark tunnel leading downward. A waft of sulfur hit my nostrils, blowing on a hot wind. I was immediately struck by the certainty that I would open the doorway to hell itself. I was about to close it when I heard a voice calling for me. "Matthew," it said, "is that you? I have been waiting for so long, calling to you and trying to bring you here." I could barely speak. My throat went dry, my vision blurred. Somehow I still managed to speak her name. It was Sophia. He stared up sightlessly at the jerked ceiling as his breaths came slower and slower. With a last chattering of teeth and a clenching of fists, he emitted a choking death gasp and lay still. I put my arms around Nate and Emily, pulling us close together. I could feel their small bodies trembling with fear. Their skin felt cold and clammy under my palms. They looked up at me with dilated pupils, looking more like frightened animals than children at that moment. "Daddy, I'm scared," Emily whispered in a quivering voice. "I want to go to home." "We will go home, I promise," I said. Thought in reality I could do no such thing, for all I knew, we'd all die within the next few moments. I was afraid to look up from the faces of my children, afraid to look of a semicircle undead abominations staring at us with their milk-white skin and filmy ghost eyes. "Is this a staring into the abyss?" Nate asked. "Am I going to come out on the other side?" I opened my mouth to respond when an icy hand grabbed my shoulder. Its claw-like fingers dug into my flesh, turning me around. Standing in front of me stood the apparent leader of the undead children, the teenage boy with the rotted clothes. "A price must be paid," the chalk-white corpse of the teenager said. "A life for a life. We have saved you from the killer of children, the hunter of men. We want one of yours to stay with us forever. We grow lonely here in the endless darkness, surrounded only by bones and stone tombs." Emily and Nate stood hugging each other, looking small and helpless. I felt like I would throw up. "You will have to kill me before you take one of my children," I hissed. "That monster already killed my wife. He murdered all of us, too," the boy gurgled in his low, airy voice, slowly, methodically tearing off limbs and cutting out eyes with fanatical obsession. He learned how to make it last. Decades of work, hunting, and tearing apart the most defenseless and innocent. But this changes nothing. We will not let you live until the choice is made.
I will do it, Nate said calmly. Stepping forward, I grabbed his arm, pulling him back. Like hell you will, I yelled. We are all living right now, and if any of you try to stop me, I will kill you. You cannot kill what is already dead, the boy said as dozens more corpses scattered forwards behind him. Somewhere the naked bodies of toddlers and infants, murdered in their innocence. Many had deep slits on their throats and Glasgow smiles curved into their cheeks. They all showed growths of black mold that covered their bodies like hellish tattoos. Their pale white eyes looked filmy and lifeless, covered in cataracts and decayed into blindness. "It's okay, Dad," Nate said, looking up at me with love in his eyes. "I'm not afraid of the darkness. I know it has eyes and it stares back at me, but I'm not afraid. It's part of us too." Pale, freezing hands grabbed me from all sides. They held me back as Nate meekly followed the boy into the darkness, looking like a lamb being led to slaughter. Nate turned off his headlamp, looking back at me one last time as he threw it down on the ground. They disappeared from view into the shadows at the end of the chamber. As soon as the blackness swallowed them up like a hungry mouth, I felt the hands release. I looked back, seeing the walking corpse of the children had all disappeared. Now only Millie stood there, small and trembling. I ran to her, throwing my arms around her and hugging her tightly. "We need to go find Nate," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "We need to go deeper into the tunnel and get Nate back. We can't let them take him." "Daddy, he's already gone," she said, crying and shaking. I could feel her heart racing in her small, fragile chest. "No, he's not," I screamed, pulling her forward by her arm. "We need to catch up with him." We sprinted through the massive chamber, seeing the passageway abruptly narrow. Ahead of us, the cave suddenly ended in a hole that went straight down into the earth. I shone my light down, trying to see the bottom, but it appeared to go thousands of feet deep. From far below us, I thought I caught glimpses of pale, cavernous faces staring up at us with dead and with the white eyes. Emily and I ran out of that cave of horrors, past the pale corpse of Melissa and the spreading pool of blood underneath her slashed throat. The cave floor sucked it up hungrily, drinking every drop until it turned into a clothed sandstone hollow wreathing her body. We got the police there as fast as we could, telling them that Nate was lost in the cave and about the murder of my wife. They sent rescue units down into the black pit at the end of the chamber. I heard later that out of over a dozen people sent down, only one of them returned alive. His hair had gone white with shock. Totally insane, he was unable to tell anyone what he had seen down there or what had happened to the rest of his unit. As far as I know, he is still in an asylum on this day. The police found evidence of hundreds of murders in the cave, committed over a period of at least 30 years. Carl's body had also mysteriously disappeared, leaving only drops of blood and pieces of torn rat intestine behind. To this day I still have constant nightmares about that place. I see Melissa's dilated pupils and slashed throat, her fingernails and lips turning blue. I see Nate as a bone-white, a staggering thing with filmy eyes. And in my nightmares, those blind cataract eyes are always staring back at me. I went caving in the Nevada desert. Inside, I found piles of children's shoes and bones. I guess it's child abuse. We drove along the bright Nevada highway, the dry heat blowing in through the open windows like a furnace. In my little sedan I had my wife of 10 years, Melissa, and our two children, Emily and Nate. Though they were twins in personality, they couldn't have seemed more different. Emily had always been outgoing and talkative, while Nate was highly introverted, a devoted reader at heart who could care less about his friends. With their wide blue eyes and dirty blonde hair, they resembled Melissa much more than me. "Are you guys excited or what?" I asked in a loud voice, yelling over the roaring wind. The air conditioner in my car hadn't been working well for a few months. Now I regretted not fixing it. I love caves," Emily said excitedly. Nate only grunted, staring fixedly down at one of Nietzsche's work, Beyond Good and Evil. For a 9-year-old, Nate seemed eerily smart. He had a mind like a camera, and always read far above his age level. "I hope there is no spiders in it, like last time," Melissa moaned in the passenger seat, her blue eyes sparkling mischievously. "Those things were bigger than my face." I shuddered slightly at the recollection of the brown recluses we had encountered in the last cave. I never much liked snakes and spiders, especially when they hide in dark spaces, waiting for a human to walk right into them. Brown recluses especially look like something from a nightmare to me, some hellish evolutionary system that produced monsters. Better those than rattlesnakes, I said, seeing the sign of a head reading, 1 mile to Sandstone Nature Preserve. To get to the cave, we would like to have hiked 20 minutes through the flat, packed earth of Nevada. "I don't really know about that," Melissa said. "A nest of brown recluses or black widows, or a nest of rattlesnakes with both will kill you. God, what a shitty way to go there." Melissa had heard about this cave from a friend at work. He had called it Sandstone Cave. He promised it stood far off the beaten path, and that almost nobody knew about it. He had given her a hand-drawn map, though it seemed like a fairly straight shot to the cliffs. As we parked in that dirt plot, sharp stones crunching under the car's tires, Melissa pulled the map out. "Jesus, Carlos, writing is so goddamn bad," she said, squinting as she put the map up to her face. I loved seeing her high cheekboned, pale face squeezed into a ludicrous expression. She gave me a dirty look. "I think you just need glasses," I said, putting an arm around her. Emily laughed in the back, a high-pitched, energetic sound that matched her bubbly personality. "My teacher said that when you get old, your eyes and ears stop working," she said. "Maybe Mom's just too old. Her eyes are falling apart like an old car." "See what you have started," Melissa said, giving me a crooked half-smile. Together we got out of the car, grabbing supplies from the trunk. Extra batteries, food, water, and a first aid kit. Nate and Emily each took a small pack of their own. If somehow, God forbid, someone got separated, I didn't want them stumbling through the pitch-black cave, calling and screaming at the darkness like panicked animals. Just the thought sent waves of dread rippling down my spine. We walked quickly and determinedly along the bare dirt trail. It wound its way through the hard-packed earth, serpentine and twisting. Large rocks that looked like they were dropped by giants started appearing along the sides, followed by steeper and steeper cliffs of red sandstone. "This is truly amazing," Melissa said excitedly. "I can't believe how empty this place is. We have this whole park to ourselves. It's so beautiful here." "It's pretty far off the beaten trail," I answered. "I doubt these trails are even." "Oh shit," Melissa screamed, jumping back suddenly. I jerked, twisting my head in confusion. Stunned, leafless bushes grew along the dark, cool patches under the cliffs that loomed overhead on both sides. And then I saw it, a dark brown silhouette, curled up into a spiral. It blended in with the sand and shadows. The snake hissed, his forked tongue flicking in and out as he stared between me and Melissa with his slitted, reptilian eyes. "A rattlesnake," I said, putting my arms out and pushing the two kids back without thinking. I saw the rattlesnake looked young and small, certainly not a full-grown adult. Like many juvenile rattlesnakes, its rattler probably hadn't fully developed yet, which made them far more dangerous in their deathly silence. If Melissa hadn't seen it, I might have stepped on the thing's tail. Its slitted eyes glittered with daring and fearlessness. I felt speechless, and Melissa had turned and started jogging back in the other direction. Abruptly, I felt a small body push past me. To my horror, I saw Nate approaching the rattlesnake, carrying a long, thick branch with a fork at the end. "Nate," I yelled in panic, "get back here." He calmly continued staring at the snake as it shook its tail furiously, its fangs swiveling out like switchblades. Drops of venom fell from them. The snake opened its mouth wide, showing its cottony white gums. Keeping a safe distance, Nate pushed it back by the neck. The snake writhed and hissed, twisting its body in rapid figure eights. It beat at the stick over and over, its thin, flat head jerking out in multiple rapid strikes. Nate threw the stick in the opposite direction. The snake flew through the air, landing 10 feet away. It slithered away into the brush, disappearing from view within a moment. Rattled by the experience, I stood shaking and hyperventilating in the same spot for a long time. Emily had fallen far back with Melissa, their eyes wide and filled with fear. Both of them feared snakes even more than I did. Only Nate seemed totally calm as he surveyed me. "It's gone," he said. "We can go now. I think I can see the opening of the cave from here." Looking up, I realized he was right. A few hundred paces away stood a massive, jagged hole in the shape of a screaming mouth. It reminded me of the cavernous mouth of some toothless old man, magnified to monstrous proportions, black and empty and formed into a silent scream. We walked together in silence. The entrance grew larger with every step. As we drew nearer, I saw it stood nearly 5 times the height of a man. Nate's eyes gleamed excitedly. "When you stare into the abyss stares into you," he said as he stared intently into the screaming mouth of the cave. I glanced at him. "What does that even mean?" I asked, feeling out of my element. "When you stare into the dark recesses of your mind, the meaninglessness and pain and insanity that follows every person like a shadow, then it stares back. The dark places of the mind have eyes of their own. There's lots of them. And when you stare into them, they stare just as deeply back to you," he said, reciting his knowledge of Nietzsche's philosophy with a simple ease. "Well, that's all more wheat," Melissa said, rolling her eyes. Nate and I led the way into soapstone cavern. The air felt cold and damp. Currents blew out from passageways deep under the earth, smelling slightly of sulfur and algar. "This cave smells funny," Emily whispered, wrinkling her small nose. "It's probably just subterranean rivers or lakes," I said. I noticed how our voices echoed down the cavern, eerily bouncing off the rocks until the words became nothing more than shadows of whispers. We pulled on our LED headlamps as the last of the sunlight died at the threshold. The path curved sharply to the right ahead, covered in stalagmites and stalactites that jutted out like fangs from the wet, gleaming rock. We walked for about 15 minutes. Melissa ended up getting bored and walking slightly ahead of us, as she was by far in the best shape and never got winded. So she was the first to notice the extremely disturbing sights we would find in this cave. "What the fuck?" she yelled loudly. "What is that?" I jogged forward, turning a sharp corner to see her staring open-mouthed at a mountain of children's shoes piled up on the right side of the tunnel. Some looked almost brand new, while others looked used and worn. The styles ranged over decades, and the size varied from those of a toddler to those of a teenager. In many of the shoes I saw yellowed leg bones jutting out. The pile loomed 5 feet in the air, containing probably thousands of shoes. "Oh, Jesus Christ," I whispered, and I was horrified. "Who put this here? Is this some sort of weird memorial, or is it something? There's legs in some of the shoes." "Daddy," Emily said nervously. "Whose legs are those, Daddy?" "No, honey, those must be animal bones," Melissa exclaimed, putting a thin hand around Emily's shoulder and putting her close. "Just animal bones." I took a step closer to the pile, inspecting the bones. I couldn't tell at a single glance if the bones were animal or human. They all looked small, child-sized perhaps, but maybe they could have come from a young deer or a coyote. "Well, I'm not sure if those are animal bones," I said. "I think we should turn around. This is creepy as hell. For all we know, this could be the trophy side of some sick fuck who kills kids and steals their shoes. We should have the police come in and see if they think the bones are human or not. What if a serial killer put this here? What if this is his shrine to death?" "Dad," Nate said with a note of fear in his voice, "I had really heard there. There is someone else here." I spun around, my heart frantically beating in my chest as the gravity of his words sunk in. Beyond the shallow heads of my family, I saw the dim beam of a flashlight bouncing up and down the caravan walls. A rising sense of panic gripped me. With my nerves spurting, I grabbed Melissa's arm. "We need to go. We don't know who the fuck that is. They might be the sick of putting the shoes here." Stumbling alongside Nate and Emily, we took off, heading deeper into the winding tunnels of soapstone cavern, where further evidence of atrocities waited like a guillotine blade ready to fall. "Run as fast as you can," I told the kids, pushing them forward. Our headlamps bounced off the jagged rocks forming the sharp walls of the cavern. They started closing in on us. The tunnel rapidly narrowed from a wide path 10 feet across into something the width and height of a coffin. We had to slow down and go single file. I glanced back, seeing the glare of the flashlight emerging from around the corner. "He's almost here," I whispered, urging them on. The kids squeezed through with no problem, but Melissa and I kept getting caught on the sharp rocks that sliced at our clothes and flesh. The tunnel seemed to only get narrower as it turned 90 degrees. "Hey!" A low, hoarse voice yelled from behind us. "Don't go in there. Just wait." The flashlight landed directly on me. I pushed myself forward with Melissa only inches in front of me, stumbling into her back. As we navigated the turn, the flashlight beam fell further behind us, but it'd only be a matter of a minute until the unknown figure caught up with me. In front of us, Emily gave a panicked shriek. Nate and Emily stood, shell-shocked and still, their mouths open in identical expressions of horror. I followed their gaze, seeing a sight from hell. An infant with bone-white skin and a cavernous, toothless mouth like that of an obscene old man slung across the wall. It scurried forward like a salamander, clinging to the regular granite surface with no apparent effort. Its naked hands and feet were formed into sharp, claw-like points. It gave a scream like a witch being burned alive, gurgling with deep, resonant notes of agony. Its naked body seemed twisted and deformed, and patches of what looked black mold ate away at its arms and legs. Go back, Melissa wailed, slamming into me in her frantic attempt to move away from the abomination. Oh God, go back. What the hell is that thing going here? It never stopped screaming, never paused to inhale, as if it didn't need to breathe at all. I didn't need any motivation. I shoved my body through the tight tunnel, forming my way back around the steep corner. The shrinking infant was only a stone's throw away. Nate and Emily who pushed forward at Melissa's heels. I felt new scraps and grasses tear across my body from the sharp rocks of the cave. But with the rush of adrenaline, I wouldn't notice the pain until later. As soon as we made it around the corner, the shrinking cut off as suddenly as if a record had been stopped. A man in front of us, blocking the way. He had a rounded moon face and close-cropped black hair. His dark eyes twinkled merrily as he shone the flashlight into our faces. "Carlos," Melissa asked. She constantly checked her back. The panic I still felt was reflected in her pale face and why shell-shocked her eyes. "Carlos, thank God you're here. Something is very wrong with this place." Carlos only gave a faint smile at this, but it didn't reach his black eyes. "I see you brought your children," he said in a strange, disjointed cadence. "More children in the shadows." His voice came out low and husky. He stared constantly down at Nate and Emily. "Did you hear what I said?" Melissa said. "We need to get the hell out of here." Carlos' gaze never faltered from the kids. With his thin lips pressed into a tight grimace, he took a predatory step forward, keeping his right hand in his black jeans pocket. "Stay back," I hissed. My intuition screamed at me that something was wrong. I pushed the kids back, not sure if the greater threat came from behind us or in front of us. "If you take one more step." I saw a silver flash in the white glare of the headlamp. Carlos pulled out a knife, slashing out at my throat. I fell back, hearing the blade whiz past my skin. I slammed hard into the wet granite floor, feeling the wine get knocked out of me. Melissa continued pushing the kids back. I could hear her panicked breathing, see the drops of sweat falling off her nose. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Carlos struck out with the knife, slicing it right to left and left to right in a manic frenzy. I heard a wet thud above me, followed by a bubbling grunt. Melissa fell down next to me, her throat cut from ear to ear. Blood spurted from the open gash as she choked, coughing and gurgling with the last of her dying energy. Within seconds, she had gone still. Her pupils started dilating, her lips fading to a suffocating bluish cast. I crawled frenetically away, pushing myself up in a blind panic. The kids had disappeared around the corner, back in the direction of the welling. Bone-white infant in the chaos of the moment, I had lost sight of them. Now a pure sense of panic gripped my heart. If I lost Melissa and the kids in one day, I might as well just go home and hang myself. I would have nothing left to live for after all. Carlos was a heavy-set man, and he had a difficult time navigating through the tight corners of the passage. Breathing heavily, still in shock over the death of my wife, I ripped my way through, seeing the silhouettes of Emily and Nate far ahead of me. I saw no sign of the strange demonic infant that had crawled the wall like a centipede. Thank God. The passageway rapidly opened up into a massive chamber that echoed with every footfall. I glanced back, seeing Carlos' flashlight moving not far behind me. Nate and Emily screamed ahead of me. I sprinted forward, trying to get to them. "Dad, look," Emily cried, pointing at what lay at the end of the chamber. Dozens of human skeletons lay endlessly dreaming. Their corpses were tossed haphazardly into a pile, their limbs intertwined like rats in a rat king. All of the bodies looked small, like those of children. The bones began to shake and rattle. The yellowed cracks winded as they danced, jumping up and down as if they were possessed. From the pitch blackness at the end of the chamber, More corpse white figures of children stepped out, their pale, cataract eyes haunted and dead. Carlos came around the corner, screaming with insanity and bloodlust. He had the gore-stained knife raised high. He saw me, his eyes looking dark and hooded as he sprinted forward. The bodies of the children slunk forwards, some of them creeping along the walls and ceiling, others dragging broken legs behind them. I thought they would come for me and Nate and Emily, surround us and murder us, but they streamed past us like a river rushing past a boulder. I saw the scarring and vein slinking along the wall, its cavernous mouth opened wide in a silent scream. It hit Carlos in a blur, shattering his leg with a sickening crack. His knee exploded in a shower of gore and bone splinters. He fell on his side, his sick, confused wailing intensifying as more of the undead children surrounded him. They stood over him like grim reapers, staring down at him with their pale, blind eyes. "You killed us," the tallest of them said. It looked like a teenager, a boy with rotted stripes of blue jeans and a t-shirt still hanging to his mummified flesh. His lipless mouth chattered with every word. His voice sounded like an autumn wind blowing through dry leaves. "But in this place nothing ever really dies. We live in the shadows here, and it feeds us, and we feed it. And you too will feed it here." "No," Carlos whimpered, trying to crawl away. "Get away from me, you are dead. I killed you." The teenage corpse gave a grim, lipless smile as the wailing infant slithered forward toward Carlos' face. It stopped mere inches from it, its white eyes staring blindly into his black ones. Without warning, it started crawling under his body, ripping at his chest with its sharp claws. With a gurgling banshee wail, it winded the hole, snapping the bones like twigs as it shoved its widening abyss of a mouth deep inside. Carlos gave a scream of abject agony and terror as the infant bored into his body like a screaming tick. I saw its thin, emaciated legs slipping off the wet carbon floor before they disappeared from view moments later.